Hello and welcome back to the IMD Podcast Network. This week, Mike Wade and Amit Joshi are sitting down with Jose Parra Moyano, IMD's Professor of Digital Strategy, to talk about how AI can help anybody become an expert and the democratization of data analytics.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another episode of Mike and Amit Talk Tech. Continuing with our sequence of inviting guests who have written chapters, essays, and thought pieces in our book, Gain, it is an absolute pleasure to welcome my friend and my colleague today, Jose Parra. So, Jose joined us about a couple of years ago from Copenhagen. And since he has joined us, he has absolutely taken IMD and the corporate world by storm with his thoughts and his ideas around the use and implementation of all kinds of AI. So, Jose, a very warm welcome to you to this podcast.
Thank you very much, Amit. Thank you very much, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here today with you.
In your article, you talk a lot about the fact that generative AI empowers non-technical people to be able to do a lot more with technology than has ever happened before. That's an interesting take on generative AI. Do you want to elaborate on that just a little bit?
Yes, absolutely, with pleasure. The idea comes from questioning or asking myself, why is it that managers are needed? Why do business leaders have a job? A mentor and now friend told me once, well, it's because they manage uncertainty. It's because uncertainty that these people have a job. I say, all right, sounds like very plausible. And then the chain of thought kept going, and I realized something that's very obvious for a lot of people, that when you analyze data, when you can build models and recognize patterns in data, you get insights that help you reduce uncertainty. So I thought, well, if you manage to analyze data and get those insights, you'll become a better leader. What's the hack? That analyzing data is extremely difficult. You need to run this dirty code, have some statistical background, etc. Until generative AI entered the room. Gen AI is very good at interpreting questions written in plain English, convert them into code, run this code on data, and start providing you, assuming that you ask the right questions, with insights that will help you to reduce uncertainty and therefore make better decisions. So that's what I was aiming to say when I wrote the chapter.
Okay, so that Gen AI helps managers who may not be technical to use, get more insights out of data to reduce uncertainty. What are some practical examples of that? How could that actually work?
Last week, I was working with a company, a pharmaceutical company, that was all about using Gen AI for applications that really affect the business, the top line. They were not about efficiency. They really wanted to see the money. So I start scratching my head. Okay, what can I show them? What can I teach them? And in an interview in preparation to the sessions that we were going to have, the chief of innovation says, if only we could forecast better. And I said, well, that's exactly where Gen AI is going to help you. You have a lot of data from the past. You have the forecast that you made that may have been good or bad. And that's data from which you can gain some patterns, or you can run some analytical models there and see if at a local level or at a global level within the organization, you get to forecast better. And this is something that has become extremely helpful these days with generative AI. You give the data to the model, you ask the question, how much am I going to sell next quarter? And you start a conversation from which insights may come out, which definitely helps you to predict better.
I want to pick up on that a little bit, Jose, because a lot of the focus on generative AI so far has not been on that. It's been on, how can we improve productivity, efficiency, save a little bit of time. The focus has been a lot more on it seems to be on the cost side than the kind of the innovation or the revenue side. Do you think this is a missed opportunity? And how do you think this is going to change, if at all?
I think it's natural. We start thinking about how do we do the things that we have been doing now, but with Gen AI. How do we know what we are good at doing, but better in a more efficient way? The interesting thing, and that's already a lot, right? But I think that the conversation within companies gets much more interesting when you start asking the following question, which is, what can I do now because of Gen AI that I couldn't do before. Because this really opens the horizon. What are the new business models if we think in grand terms? Or what can I do as an executive or as a manager in my company thanks to Gen AI that I couldn't do otherwise? And because data analytics or data science is difficult in itself and requires a lot of education, time, experience, it's not where decision makers usually invest time. They haven't been trained on that, and for good reasons. And it's thanks to Gen AI that now they can start having conversations that resemble the conversations that a data scientist or a data analyst would have with data. It's not that data scientists or data analysts are going to lose their jobs by any means. What we see is that they are more important than ever. But it's also that the normal person, and I say normal as the non-data affine person, can now do something that he or she couldn't do before. And this is really enhancing. When we speak about empowering or having a use of Gen AI that empowers executives, and this is something that I have heard many times happening in this podcast, that by the way, I admire a lot. This is for me one of the good applications of it. Let's empower them to do something they couldn't do otherwise.
So it's fascinating you should say that, Jose, because I was having a conversation with the CTO of a large company, and one of the things he made, and this was even a couple of years ago, and I think he made the prediction saying that, the biggest impact that Gen AI will have will actually be on quote unquote regular analytics, things that a small percentage of the company could do either using, sophisticated statistical tools like SAS or SPSS or even Microsoft Excel. And he says that's what's going to be the biggest gain, at least in the near term. And you kind of seem to echo that. But I'd love to hear your perspective on something that you touched upon, which is how does the role of quote unquote experts in data science, experts, and we can extend that not just to data science, but to coding, right? I mean, this thing can code pretty well. So I could be someone who has never written a line of code in my life. And today I can churn out Python or C++ code, which is going to be pretty darn solid, right? What's going to be the role of people like software engineers, of data scientists, etc.? So, first of all, do you see a role for them? How do you see it evolving, Jose?
I think we need to make a clear differentiation here between, let's stick to the topic of data, and you can anytime substitute data by writing code and it will be the same. Let's just say those who have a job and need to analyze data to make their job better, and those whose job is to analyze data, which would be the traditional data scientists or data analysts and so forth and so on. Now, for the first group, for those who have a job where analyzing data is going to be helpful, their life is going to be bright because they can, as I said before, do many more things now, gain, using the title of your book, in the age of AI. Now, for the second group, those who use or whose job is to do data analytics or data science, their job is going to evolve drastically because now the generation of the code happens at, I'm going to exaggerate a little bit here, at almost zero cost. So they need to evolve into now writing much better code, or using the same analogy that I said before, do things they couldn't do before. We all know the mantra, 80% of the job of a data scientist is to clean the data. Well, now let's all assume that the data is clean and work on problems that we couldn't solve before, because data science is by no means easy and by no means solved. So I wouldn't be very afraid being a data scientist, and they know this better than I know it, because they are going to be even more needed than before because their bosses now understand how important they are.
You talk a lot about the difference between doing what you do now better and doing new things. And that the real shift with generative AI is the second one, that being able to do the new things. My sense is that that sounds good, but it's hard to do because people don't know how to do that. I mean, they know what they do now. So it's not that hard for them to say, okay, I can just summarize a meeting, or I can write an email. I'm already doing those things. I can do them quickly and more easily. But the second one, doing new things, that's a bigger jump. So how can you help people to get there? Is it just a matter of training, or what is it?
That is absolutely true, and probably applies not only to artificial intelligence, but to any aspect of our professional life, right? So the traditional change management would apply here. What I see working with the companies with which we work, and it's interesting, is the inspirational part. You demonstrate, you show them something nice, something that has a flavor of a wow effect, and then you charge their batteries to go and walk this difficult road of suddenly you have to start analyzing your data and you will still code, which is ugly, right? So it's the inspirational part, which brings us to the topic of the people transformation. Artificial intelligence is extremely powerful, and I really like a lot of the things that you can do with it. There is, however, one element of it that I really dislike, which is the name artificial intelligence. And maybe I don't like it because I feel threatened. In the moment in which you have a computer that acts intelligently and you have spent your life trying to look and act intelligently, what's your space in the organization? It's threatening. So the question is, how do we see this technology as a partner, as a new team member? Echoing one of your articles, I think it was for you, Amit, from a couple of years ago, as a team member that is going to enable us to do new stuff. And of course, when you interact with a new team member, you're both tense. How is this going to look like? Is the colleague going to be a nice person or not? And it takes a little bit of time until you start to trust each other. You see that, hey, potentially the collaboration will work. And it's the same with AI. Test the boundaries, see if you can work together, in which circumstances you can work together, and when you're better off alone, and move on, right?
This is absolutely fascinating, Jose. So I have another perspective on this, or just building on what you said, essentially. I mean, if you really think about what you said, right, which is data analytics, and now a lot more people can do analytics. It's not constrained to people who were quote unquote trained with certain techniques or with certain or had access to software, etc. Right? But if we consider that analytics is a tool, it's a means to an end, would you forecast, or would you say that we are on the cusp of a massive breakthrough in terms of how various functions across the organization add efficiency, add innovation, add this? Because think about it, right? If till yesterday I was a salesperson, I would sell, I don't really know technology, I can maybe work with my data team. But today you're telling me that I can take my past data, I can take my past conversations with clients, put that into something like a Gemini or ChatGPT, analyze them, and become a better salesperson, right? Understand what keywords work with certain clients, understand what time of day works with certain clients. Who the heck knows how this goes, right? So, is this something that you foresee?
Absolutely. I would say the level is now much higher. The standard is much, much higher. We cannot, of course, for the next couple of months, maybe couple of years, we can still do the things pretending Gen AI is not here. But someone within your organization, or someone joining the organization, or someone in a competitor's organization is going to start using Gen AI. And if they use it right, in the right way, they will sell more, using the example that you brought. So we cannot afford, I would say, not using it, because in the moment in which the adoption becomes really big, there's a critical mass, we will look not so good by not using it. And that's something that I think we need to also reflect about, especially also in the whole discussion about substitution of jobs, the future of jobs, and so forth and so on. I think it's of paramount importance to really start seeing jobs as something that is going to evolve very quickly, not disappear, but to evolve. AI will become part of our job. Like writing at some point become part of everybody's or almost everybody's jobs. You had to learn how to write. For some people it was difficult, and at some point you couldn't just not write to conduct any kind of job, right? So it's an evolution, and probably we will go down this road.
It sounds like what you're saying is there's a short-term opportunity and threat, I guess, both sides of the same coin, to leverage the power of this technology while it's just emerging and not everybody is using it. You maybe think at some point in the future it'll be ubiquitous like writing and everybody can write, but there's a period of time now where those who get it, those who can use it, those who are comfortable with it can have a distinct advantage over people who can't or don't. So, for people listening to this podcast, what advice would you provide to them, wherever role they are, maybe sitting in an organization somewhere? What should they be doing to kind of position themselves on the winning side going forward?
I would bet that those that are listening to us have already been provided some kind of Gen AI tool. The majority of organizations have already done that last year, even the year before. And some of these tools will enable people to start analyzing data. So next Monday or this afternoon, whenever you're listening this podcast, think of a problem. Think of a problem where you have to make a decision and where there is uncertainty. There are 3, 4, 5, 6 options you could take, which are way too many, right? And then start reflecting about, is there any kind of data that Eventually, if I crunch it, if I analyze it, if I would have the best data scientists on my side, is there any data that could give me some insight and make me eliminate a couple of options? Because then it will become obvious that these are not good options. So think about it from the problem perspective. What can you personally at your organization do? That's at the corporate level where data, you need to be very compliant with privacy and use the tools that they provide you. Now, at a personal level, take your finances. You want to make a cash flow for the next couple of months or the next couple of years, or you're thinking about a mortgage. Should you go for the fixed rate mortgage or something hybrid? Play around with it, do scenarios, give it assumptions, and you'll see how the conversation becomes a much more interesting conversation than a couple of years ago. In other words, what I was saying before, the level is now much higher, and we can all benefit from that.
So Jose, the flip side of the coin, right? I mean, what advice or what words of caution would you give our listeners, not in using AI per se, because I'm sure there's tons of things they've heard about that, but in using AI and Gen AI for data analytics? What do they need to keep in mind there?
I would use 3 words to answer that question: trust but verify. Trust but verify. Trust that the machine is going to do a good job. And the more the time passes, the better the job will be. And make sure that you verify the outcomes. So always ask a couple of questions whose answers you know already and see if the answers match or not. Reserve a little bit of the data for where you already know the outcome, right? And then compare the prediction with the data that you know, right? Someone that is a bit more literate in data will say in sample, out of sample. But basically, reserve a little bit of the truth. Don't give it to the model. Ask the model to predict the truth and see how well the model, the chat, or the tool is actually doing. Trust and verify, or trust but verify, depending on how optimistic or optimistic you are while listening to the podcast today.
And do you see that the incidence of, I don't really like the word hallucination, but let's call it that, bringing up answers that are not factually correct, is it changing? Is it getting less? Are we seeing fewer of these issues, or is it still in the same as it was before?
It's decreasing drastically. The amount of hallucinations, or let's say the amount of, I'm going to call them or describe them as mismatches between what the user wants and what the system provides, they are decreasing because these models, they learn very fast. So when I ask a generic question with a very little context today, there have already been a lot of generic questions asked with very little context whose outcomes or whose answers were assessed by the users. So the models themselves have learned how to interpret my very poorly formulated questions, and they give me what I need. Which again goes back to the idea of trust but verify, because we need to know what is it that we're getting and not give too many options to the system. In other words, remain on the driver's seat.
But you're saying that the trust is getting higher and the need to verify is going down.
Yes, I am observing that. And still, I feel obliged to say, let's make sure that whenever we make decisions, right, who is responsible? We are responsible. The managers to whom we report are going to consider us responsible. So let's make sure that we don't put our faith in the hands of a model. Even if the model is very sophisticated, let's understand that we are working with probabilities here, that we are working with models that are going to give us answers no matter the question that we ask. So let's use them responsibly.
Okay, so you're an optimist, generally speaking, right? You see this as a tool to empower, not a tool to replace.
Yes, I am an optimist, absolutely, and I think it's better to be an optimist because there's no way out of AI. AI is here to stay. So let's optimistically look at it, try to understand it, try to go a little bit like one step beyond the surface and scratch a little bit to see, okay, what is really going on here? Test it, play, break it, be patient, because sometimes the answers will not be the best answers. So try to understand, why is this answer not the answer I was expecting? Is this wrong? If you see something that is wrong and that the others think is good, you again have an advantage. You understand the reality better. So let's just embrace this because there's no way out, and try to do this with certain joy.
It's so cool you should say that, Jose, because I often say that, working with Gen AI, it's not like software, it's not like debugging software. It's more like training a dog, right? I mean, you've got to be persistent. It's got to be a little probabilistic. Sometimes you're going to come back home and find a mess in your house. But most times, over time, this thing will get better and give you a lot of joy.
and hopefully it doesn't bite you. It doesn't bite you too much. No, I think it's a positive message. It's here, so may as well use it. And I think I'm taking away from your comment that maybe start by thinking about how to use it to make what you already do better, more efficient and productive. But don't stop there. There's all kinds of opportunities to use it to do things that you can't do today, but you need to spend the time. You need to spend the time, you invest the time to learn the tools, to play with the tools, to make sure that you're empowered and that you get the advantage and not someone else. All right, Jose Parra, thank you so much for joining us today on the podcast. We really appreciate your points of view. And if you want any more information about this podcast or about anything to do with AI training, please go to imd.org and find the information there. Thanks a lot for listening, and we'll see you next time on Mike and Amit Talk Tech.
That's all for this week. This podcast was proudly brought to you by the International Institute for Management Development in Lausanne. You can find out more at imd.org.